What if an angel fell, not for power, but for love? What if Samael, once a guardian of fire and throne, was seduced not by pride, but by a forbidden longing for a mortal woman? Ancient texts whisper of a love that defied divine order, a union never permitted, a passion that opened a rift between realms. From this transgression came more than rebellion. It birthed a curse, one that echoes through human bloodlines, distorting destinies, darkening nations, and summoning judgment. Could it be that humanity's suffering was not merely inherited from Adam, but from the broken heart of an angel? And if so, what hope remains for those marked by his legacy? Before time unfolded in measured days and nights, before the breath of man stirred the dust of Eden, there existed a realm of blazing glory and terrifying order, a place where angels moved like fire across the sea of glass, their voices like thunder, their forms like lightning cloaked in light. Among them stood one unlike the rest, not in power or beauty alone, but in essence. He was called Samael, the poison of God. Neither fully messenger nor warrior, he was an instrument of divine severity, the appointed angel of death, the executor of judgments too dreadful for lesser spirits to bear. The thrones trembled at his passing. His name was whispered in reverence and dread. For Samael did not simply deliver judgment, he was judgment incarnate. Yet within this terrible angel burned something unexpected, not pride as in Lucifer, not curiosity as in the Watchers, but longing. A longing so ancient, so buried beneath centuries of obedience that even the stars did not see it coming. It began not with rebellion, but with wonder. As he passed through the veil between the heavens and the earth, sent forth to observe mankind and enforce divine boundaries, he beheld her. She was not Eve, whose form had been shaped by divine hands within the garden's light. No, she was the one before her, Lilith, the woman forged. From the same soil as Adam, created as his equal, but cast out for her refusal to submit. She had wandered east of Eden into the wilderness where thorns grew tall and spirits howled beneath the moon, and there she remained, untamed, exiled, sovereign. Samael saw her not as a creature to be condemned, but as a mirror. In her defiance, he recognized a reflection of his own tension between duty and desire. And it was in that moment that the fracture began. He did not descend in fury, but in fascination. Unlike the Watchers, whose descent was collective and catastrophic, Samael moved alone. His visitation was not a fall, but a choice, a slow, secret unraveling of his divine allegiance. Traditions outside the canon, preserved in whispers among ancient sages and buried beneath layers of apocrypha, tell of their union. Not a momentary temptation, but a binding. Samael took Lilith not by force, but by covenant, claiming her as his bride in a union that heaven never sanctioned. Angelic. Essence entwined with human rebellion, fire-kissed flesh, and from it emerged not giants, but something far more insidious, a spiritual legacy, a curse that walked unseen. Unlike the offspring of the Watchers, the towering Nephilim whose violence corrupted the earth, this new seed was subtle. It did not manifest in strength of body, but in depth of distortion. It lived in the soul, not the sinew. This was not merely a genetic corruption, but a spiritual infection, a rebellion encoded not in height, but in heritage. And so, a shadow entered the bloodstream of mankind, unnoticed by most, unspoken by prophets, but known in the trembling of the angels who watched from above. Samael, once a flame of divine justice, had become something else entirely, a bearer of twisted intimacy, a father to a curse that did not roar, but whispered. Heaven watched in silence. No war was declared, no trumpet sounded. His departure was not like Lucifer's dramatic rebellion. It was quieter, more tragic, more treacherous. For Samael did not rise against the throne. He simply walked away from it, heart first. What happens when a being forged for holy wrath gives his affection to that which is unholy? The answer is not immediate destruction. It is the slow bleeding of divine order into chaos. Samael's presence on earth did not just bend the rules, it broke the unseen framework that held the realms in place. Lilith, too, became something other than what she was. No longer merely the woman who rejected Adam, she became the queen of an alternate line, the matriarch of a brood not defined by names, but by influence. Spirits of disobedience, of spiritual seduction, of ideological defiance. Her union with Samael sealed the wound between heaven and earth. It became the seedbed of every doctrine that glorified self above God, every culture that exalted power over purity, every act of worship twisted into idolatry. And the most chilling truth? This curse did not announce itself. It cloaked itself in beauty, in intelligence, in charisma. It did not destroy mankind in a flood of blood, but corrupted mankind from within. And as generations multiplied, its origin was forgotten, buried beneath layers of myth, distorted into tales of demons and dark queens. But the root remained, an angel's love that became lawless, a woman's freedom that became defiance, and a legacy that would haunt the human race through every age. Samael's name was gradually removed from holy lips. The scrolls stopped recording his missions. His seat among the hosts was left vacant. And yet, his influence remained, not in heaven, but in history. His story is one of the most terrifying because it hides itself as romance. Forbidden love may stir the imagination of poets, but in the courts of eternity, it has consequences that echo forever. And so, the question haunts us. Was Samael's desire merely a personal fall? Or was it the trigger of a curse that still shapes the destiny of nations? Before we continue, if this content has blessed your life, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to bless the channel, click the Super Thanks button and leave an offering of any amount or become a member. That way, we can continue investing in research and improvements to bless your life even more. Lilith. The name echoes like a forgotten thunderclap across the vaults of ancient memory, both feared and revered, clothed in myth yet never fully silenced. In the earliest traditions, long before Eve stepped forth from Adam's side, Lilith was already walking the earth, formed not from a rib, but from the same soil, animated by the same breath. She stood eye to eye with Adam, not behind him, not beneath him. And this equality, rather than breeding harmony, became the tinderbox of discord. When asked to submit, she refused. When commanded to lie beneath, she rose instead. For this rebellion against divine order, she was cast out, not into death, but into a place far stranger, the wilderness east of Eden, where light flickers uncertainly and unformed spirits wander in the dust. Here, among the thorns and shadows, Lilith did not perish. She evolved. No longer a companion to man, she became the mother of disobedience, not through seduction, but through sovereignty. She spoke to the night, and the night listened. She called to the chaos, and the chaos came. Hers was not the rebellion of pride like Lucifer's, nor the lust of the Watchers. It was the rebellion of self-rule. And in that raw defiance, Samael found her. The angel of death, the enforcer of divine limits, did not see in her a threat, but a mirror. Both had known power, both had touched glory, and both had turned from their appointed place. Their meeting was not accident, nor mere attraction, it was convergence. When Samael, weary of his role as executioner, gazed upon Lilith, he saw not a fallen woman, but a sovereign one. And when Lilith beheld Samael, she saw not a predator, but a partner. Their union did not erupt like the Watcher's descent in Enoch. It unfolded like a slow-burning fire, secretive and spiritual. There was no ceremony, no blessing, no scrolls etched with divine approval. Only fire and flesh, shadow and vow. What emerged from them was not a child of clay, nor a titan of strength, but a lineage of distortion. Beings who bore no physical signature, but left spiritual fingerprints wherever they moved. They were not seen, but felt. Tensions that split kingdoms, ideologies that divided hearts, appetites that grew without restraint. Their influence slithered beneath the surface of history, nameless yet omnipresent. Some traditions call them the Lilim, the seed of Lilith, spirits that dwell in twilight, neither holy flesh nor holy spirit, but something in between. They are not demons in the traditional sense, but carriers of rebellion, infecting the structures of families, nations, and religions with quiet resistance to divine design. Where the Nephilim once walked in stature and violence, the Lilim whispered in courtrooms, slept beneath thrones, and lingered in the bloodlines of kings. They did not lift swords, they lifted ideas. Ideas of dominion without obedience, freedom without submission, power without accountability. And through them, the legacy of Lilith became a spiritual pandemic. The prophets did not always name them, but they saw their fruit. When Israel turned to foreign gods, when Judah sacrificed its children, when kings heaped glory upon themselves, and prophets were silenced in the streets, there in the backdrop moved the invisible children of defiance. And still, Lilith did not perish. She endured through legend, invoked by sorcerers, feared by mothers, denied by scribes, yet preserved in oral whispers and midnight visions. Some said she flew by night with owl's wings. Others claimed she drank the breath of newborns. But the truth was far more haunting. Lilith was not a monster of the dark. She was the unresolved wound of Eden, the one who left by choice, the one whom man could not forget and whom heaven could not reinstate. And through her union with Samael, the fracture became irreversible. The spiritual order was not just disturbed, it was altered. The offspring of this union, these beings of influence and rebellion, began to seed themselves into genealogies not by blood alone, but by spirit. Wherever a soul rejected divine alignment, wherever pride masked itself as enlightenment, wherever power was sought without surrender, the seed of Lilith stirred. This is not to say that all humanity is her child, but that all humanity was made vulnerable by her legacy. And Samael, no longer acting on divine command, fed this vulnerability. No longer the sword of heaven, he became the whisper behind every throne that sought sovereignty apart from the Creator. The world did not burn from this union. It changed from within. That is the most dangerous curse, not the flood that drowns, but the poison that seeps. The offspring of Lilith and Samael were not expelled from Eden. They were never allowed in. But they would ensure that Eden's door remained sealed, not by force, but by convincing man he no longer needed it. And so the legacy of defiance spread, not in armies, but in philosophies, in the exaltation of self, in the deconstruction of holiness, in the worship of desire. From Babylon to Rome, from Babel to modern Babels of thought, the echo of Lilith's voice persists. I will not submit. It is the echo that tempted Eve. It is the echo that stirred Cain. It is the echo that built empires only to watch them fall. And behind it, always, is the silent presence of the angel who once carried the justice of God, but traded it for the intimacy of rebellion. Together, Samael and Lilith wrote a new narrative into the unseen world, a narrative not of open war, but of slow corrosion. A curse that does not destroy humanity instantly, but unthreads it generation by generation. And though their names are lost to most, their legacy lives on. Every time man chooses dominion over devotion, every time the creature declares independence from the Creator, a seed is watered. A seed planted long ago in a moment of forbidden union between a wandering woman and a watching angel. It began with Cain, the first to open the ground with blood, the first to mark the earth with the stain of unrepentant rebellion. While his brother offered sacrifice in faith, Cain brought forth what his hands had earned, not what his heart had surrendered. And when his offering was rejected, the seed of defiance bloomed. He killed not a stranger, but his own brother, proving that the curse does not merely corrupt systems, it corrupts intimacy. In Cain, the curse walked for the first time in visible form. God marked him not to destroy him, but to isolate him, a wandering soul carrying invisible infection. And from Cain's lineage, the first city was built, not a garden tended in harmony, but a fortress of separation from the divine. And so the pattern began. Cities without God, cultures without covenant. The curse did not wear horns, it wore civilization, it clothed itself in the towers and tools of progress. Then came Lamech, boasting of murder as though it were glory, promising vengeance 77-fold as if he were a god. Violence became virtue. Pride became policy. The spiritual distortion was not in what men built, but in why they built it. Nimrod followed, a mighty hunter before the Lord, not in reverence, but in rivalry. He established Babel, the city whose ambition pierced the heavens, whose language sought unity without truth. It was not merely a tower of bricks, it was a declaration, we will rise without him. And behind it, unseen yet unmistakable, was the echo of Samael and Lilith. Their curse had taken root, not in bodies, but in vision. Every empire that followed, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, was born with the same spiritual mutation, dominion without submission. Kings called themselves gods. Law replaced covenant. The heavens were invoked only as ornaments to earthly power. And yet, each of these empires shared one thing: a rise wrapped in splendor and a fall shrouded in shame. Because the curse does not sustain, it consumes, like fire that lights the torch only to devour the hand that holds it. But the most terrifying manifestation was not in the violence of empires. It was in the corruption of worship. Temples once dedicated to heaven became stages for idols. The names changed: Marduk, Ra, Zeus, Jupiter, but the spirit was the same. Adoration diverted from the Creator to the creation. Behind these gods, ancient traditions claimed, were the very spirits birthed from Samael's union, beings of deceptive beauty and false illumination. They did not demand obedience, they promised freedom. They offered wisdom, power, sexual pleasure, control over nature, echoes of Eden's first deception. You will be like God. The curse did not shout, it whispered. It made sin seem like enlightenment, and even among God's chosen people, the infection spread. When Israel demanded a king, they did not merely ask for leadership, they longed to be like the nations. When Solomon multiplied wives, he also multiplied altars. When prophets warned, kings silenced them. The temple remained, but the fire of reverence dimmed. Sacrifices continued, but hearts wandered. And Jesus, when he walked among men, confronted this legacy with terrifying clarity. He looked into the eyes of the most religious men of the age, keepers of the law, guardians of the scrolls, and declared, "You are of your father, the devil," not because of their bloodline, but because of their allegiance. They had inherited the form of righteousness, but their hearts were aligned with rebellion. The curse had succeeded in the highest place, not by removing God, but by replacing him with control. The spiritual lineage of Samael was not traced through genealogy, but through agreement. Wherever truth is twisted, wherever righteousness is reduced to ritual, wherever God is honored with lips but denied with lives, the curse walks. It is not a possession, but a persuasion, a silent agreement that begins with the thought, "I can rule myself." This is what Jesus came to confront, not only sin, but the source of it. He came not just to cleanse behavior, but to sever the bloodline of rebellion. And he did it not with a sword, but with a cross. Because the only way to break a spiritual curse is to absorb its full weight. But the curse continues for those who refuse the cross. It walks in ideologies that exalt man as savior. It whispers in doctrines that deny sin. It sings in songs that glorify the self, and it reigns in hearts that call darkness light. Samael's love story, twisted and tragic, became the seed of every false kingdom. His choice was not just personal, it was prophetic. It modeled a path that many would follow: love without holiness, power without submission, knowledge without wisdom. And from that seed came not just empires, but systems. Systems that shape education, media, governance, and even religion. The curse is not locked in ancient history. It adapts. It wears new faces, speaks new languages, but it always denies the throne of God. Every culture has its myths, but beneath them lies a truth. Something ancient is at war with what is eternal. Samael's choice clothed itself in gold, in marble, in philosophy and parchment. And though time buries his name, his influence remains. Until the last throne is cast down, until the final tower falls, the curse will walk through generations, seeking hosts, building kingdoms, deceiving many. But its end has already begun, for there is another seed planted not by rebellion, but but by righteousness, and that seed is growing, silent but sure, destined to crush the head of the serpent and sever the lineage of defiance forever. It would be a mistake to believe that time dilutes curses, that ancient sins lose their potency as centuries pass. In truth, the curse that was birthed by the union of Samael and Lilith did not dissolve with the flood or weaken in the shadow of Sinai. It evolved, gaining new forms, new disguises, new hosts. As generations rose and fell, the wound first opened in Eden's exile deepened into a chasm between God and man. The prophets, standing as watchmen on the crumbling walls of covenant, began to see what others could not. There were spirits moving behind the flesh of kings and the songs of temples. Jeremiah cried of deceit in the heart that no man could understand. Ezekiel spoke of hearts of stone needing replacement. Isaiah lamented a people who drew near with lips, but whose hearts were far. These were not simply critiques of culture, they were spiritual diagnoses. Something beneath the surface had twisted. And behind this, twisting, unseen yet unmistakable, was the legacy of the angel who had once walked among the stones of fire. Samael's name faded from the mouths of men, but his influence did not. He had become a shadow among shadows, not crashing through history with storms and swords, but moving with seductive silence through thoughts, philosophies, movements. Where once he carried out death by divine decree, now he whispered rebellion in the language of freedom. Some rabbinic texts suggest that Samael visits not only in dreams but in doctrines, his new weapon no longer destruction but distortion. He does not deny holiness, he redefines it. He does not oppose God openly, he rebrands him. And so, the war became internal. No longer between armies of angels and demons on mountaintops, but within the soul of every man and woman born under the sun. A war of loyalties, of unseen alignments, of whispered agreements. The curse no longer needed to raise tyrants or topple nations to advance. It only needed a heart that preferred autonomy over obedience, enlightenment over surrender, self over spirit. In the ancient world, this war appeared in countless forms. Pharaoh hardened his heart not merely against Moses, but against the covenant God represented. Ahab built temples to Baal while still claiming lineage from Abraham. Jezebel wielded seductive power not just over kings but over prophets, twisting worship into performance, sacrifice into manipulation. Even the righteous fell into the cycle. David, a man after God's own heart, was not immune to the unseen pull. His moment of sin with Bathsheba and the murder that followed were not merely personal failings, they were echoes of that ancient distortion. Desire that ignores divine boundaries. And through it all, Samael did not scream, he suggested. He offered half-truths laced with beauty, promises of power without purity, rights without righteousness, identity without design. The curse cloaked itself in art, in law, in culture, in creed. It even learned to preach. Paul would later write of those who wear the mask of apostles but are servants of another light. The war had moved into pulpits, into scrolls, into songs. In the silence between prayers and the pride hidden behind sermons, the curse found sanctuary. And all the while, humanity called it progress. Yet, the effects were unmistakable. Families fractured, nations rose and collapsed under the weight of greed, lust, and idolatry. Love grew cold. Truth was bartered for relevance. And deep in the soul of mankind, a weariness settled, a groaning, as if something inside remembered Eden but could no longer find the way back. The curse did not destroy bodies, it eroded purpose. Like a parasite, it did not kill its host outright. It fed off the soul's desire for meaning, for transcendence, for glory. It promised fulfillment but delivered fragmentation. And so, even when the temple stood and sacrifices burned and psalms were sung, the people walked in, spiritual drought. The prophets cried not against idolatry alone, but against false worship, against empty rituals performed by hands disconnected from hearts, against justice withheld while festivals flourished. It was not that God had hidden himself, it was that the people had embraced a God fashioned in their own image. This too was the curse, not atheism, but distorted theism. and behind it, the shadow of Samael moved still. But even in this thick darkness, a question began to stir, not on the lips of kings or the scrolls of sages, but in the hearts of the humble. Can it be reversed? Is the curse too old, too deep, too embedded in the marrow of man to ever be undone? Or is there a hope older than the rebellion, a promise deeper than the wound? Scripture hints at such hope from the beginning. To Eve, God spoke of a seed, one who would crush the serpent's head, though his own heel would be bruised. A strange prophecy, veiled in pain and blood, yet bright with defiance against darkness. Through Abraham, God promised a blessing that would touch all nations, even those poisoned by rebellion. Through David, he pledged a throne that would never be shaken, not by Nephilim, not by Rome, not even by death. These were not just promises of kings, they were declarations of war against the curse itself. And at the center of them all was a figure not yet born, but already eternal. One who would not merely confront evil, but embody righteousness. One who would not just resist temptation, but uproot its source. Not an angel, not a prophet, not a scribe, but the Son. The seed not of Samael and Lilith, but of heaven and earth united in flesh. A new Adam, untouched by defiance, yet tempted in every way. A lamb who would absorb the curse, not avoid it. But before he could come, the war had to expose itself. The curse had to run its full course, and humanity had to look in the mirror and see not just brokenness, but complicity. Only then could redemption be received. Only then could grace be more than a concept. It could be a rescue. The curse walks still. In ideologies that promise heaven without a cross, in doctrines that erase sin to magnify self, in movements that exalt love but deny its author. And yet, the question still burns. Can what began in rebellion be reversed? The answer is coming. Not with noise, but with blood. Not with thunder, but with a whisper. Not with conquest, but with a cross. For in the midst of the unseen war, a seed was planted in the womb of a virgin. A seed not of defiance, but of deliverance. And the war, though long, is already turning. Why would the eternal and omnipotent God, the one who measured the heavens with his hand and named every star, permit such a rupture in the order he himself declared good? Why allow a mighty angel like Samael to descend, not in mission, but in lust? Why tolerate a union that heaven never sanctioned, a love that mocked the holiness of creation? Could he not have severed the possibility? Before it was born, barred the heart of the angel from longing, sealed the eyes of Lilith from desire. These are not idle questions. They are cries from the wounded histories of humanity, echoes of a race that has suffered beneath the shadow of a love never meant to be. But the answer does not lie in divine negligence. It lies in divine justice. For the same God who gave man the choice to obey or rebel, to love or to lust, to guard Eden or to reach for the fruit, also gave angels the dignity of will. Free will is not the absence of order. It is the proof of divine love. It is the risk that true worship requires. And in this risk, some chose the fire of rebellion over the light of obedience. Samael's fall was not a flaw in God's design. It was a revelation of the cost of freedom. For love, when it becomes lawless, ceases to be love at all. It becomes idolatry of the self, a fire that consumes rather than refines. Samael did not simply sin by desire, he transgressed by forsaking his nature. He turned what was holy into hunger, what was sacred into seduction. And Lilith, whose very creation bore the image of equality, twisted that likeness into defiance. Their union was not merely forbidden, it was a breach in the harmony of heaven and earth. And yet, God did not annihilate them in the instant. He is not a tyrant who deletes error without witness. He is a judge who lets history testify to the consequences of sin. And from that forbidden union came a curse, not because God imposed it, but because rebellion always reaps ruin. Still, judgment was not the final word. For the same God who cast Samael down did not abandon the world to the darkness he helped birth, into a history polluted by angelic sin, generational bondage, and spiritual corruption. God sent not a second Samael to fight fire with fire, but a second Adam to rewrite the story altogether. Jesus, the Christ, not born of man's will nor angel's desire, but conceived by the Holy Spirit, entered the realm where rebellion reigned and did not flinch. He walked among the cursed, not as judge, but as redeemer. He touched lepers who bore in their flesh the echo of sin's decay. He dined with tax collectors who profited from the systems built by cursed ideologies. He called to prostitutes and Pharisees alike, not to shame them, but to call them out of the lineage of rebellion into a new bloodline. Jesus did not merely confront Samael's legacy, he absorbed it. Every temptation offered to him in the wilderness echoed the ancient seductions: command the stones, grasp the kingdoms, prove your power. But unlike Samael, he did not reach. He submitted. He chose the will of the Father over the desires of the self. And in doing so, he began to untangle the very curse that had choked mankind since Eden. His miracles were not merely acts of compassion, they were signs of reversal. Each healing was a wound undone. Each exorcism, a demon evicted from territory not rightfully theirs. Each word of truth was a sword cutting through centuries of deception. But it was on the cross that the price was truly paid, not just for human sin, but for the spiritual contamination that had infected creation since that first angel dared to love apart from God's command. Jesus became sin, not by committing it, but by carrying its full weight. He bore not only man's iniquity, but the spiritual distortions seeded by fallen beings. Every bloodline corrupted, every soul tormented by unseen forces, every ideology that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, all of it converged on him. And as he hung between heaven and earth, naked and mocked, the full weight of the curse fell upon him. The wrath that once belonged to Samael, the judgment that Lilith defied, the stain that passed from Cain to the kings of Babylon, it all found its target in the Lamb who was slain. And when he cried out, "It is finished," it was not merely the end of his suffering, it was the end of the curse's authority. The veil tore, the ground shook, and hell lost its legal claim on those who would believe. The resurrection 3 days later was not just vindication, it was enthronement. The Son who submitted was exalted above every power and principality, including those ancient spirits born of rebellion. He ascended not just as Savior, but as Judge, the one who now holds the keys of death and Hades, the one before whom Samael must bow, not as lover, but as conquered foe. This is the price of forbidden love. Not just the fall of angels, but the crucifixion of God. Not just the corruption of man, but the blood-soaked rescue of eternity. And today, that price has been paid in full. Before we continue, if this content has blessed your life, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to bless the channel, click the Super Thanks button and leave an offering of any amount or become a member. That way, we can continue investing in research and improvements to bless your life even more. Redemption is not the erasure of history. It is its transformation. In the tapestry of Scripture, the thread of divine purpose is often woven through the most stained and tangled strands, through names whispered in shame and stories wrapped in scandal. Genealogies that might seem to carry the residue of curses instead become the soil from which salvation springs. Tamar, a woman who posed as a prostitute to secure justice. Rahab, a harlot whose faith rescued her city's spies. Ruth, a Moabite widow from a people born in incest. All of these women, touched by human disgrace, are found in the bloodline of the Messiah. Their names are not hidden in footnotes, they are etched into the royal lineage of redemption. Why? Because God is not afraid of darkness, He transforms it. What Samael meant for corruption, what Lilith carried as legacy, was not ignored by heaven. It was answered, and not with a sword, but with a seed. The line touched by rebellion becomes, by divine sovereignty, the very path through which righteousness enters the world. Jesus did not descend into sanitized history. He stepped into a bloodline that bore both prophecy and pain. The Gospel of Matthew does not begin with miracles, but with names, a list of generations stained with idolatry, betrayal, and failure. And yet, every name, Even the ones shrouded in sin becomes part of the sacred story. It is as if God, from the very beginning, was whispering, "I do not need perfection to accomplish my will. I redeem broken lines to display unbreakable grace." And in this truth lies the great reversal. Samael sought to inject rebellion into the bloodstream of mankind. His union with Lilith was a counterfeit creation, an attempt to mirror God's generative power without his blessing. But God is not mocked. He took the same realm, humanity, and from within it brought forth the second Adam, not in rebellion, but in surrender. Jesus, born of a woman, not just bypassed the curse, but rewrote the lineage it once poisoned. The blood that flowed through his veins was not untouched by history's darkness, but it was unstained by its authority. In him, the curse found no place to cling. And more than that, in him, the curse met its end. When Jesus died, he did not merely pay the penalty of individual sin. He broke the legal chain of generational bondage. He snapped the spiritual DNA of rebellion. The veil that tore in the temple was also a veil over humanity's past, one that kept us from seeing how deeply mercy could reach. The redemption of Christ goes further than forgiveness. It rewrites identity. It does not merely rescue from hell, it reclaims inheritance. Those who were once enemies are called sons. Those whose names were written in the story of darkness are now grafted into the story of light. And yet, the past is not deleted. It remains, but not to shame. It becomes a testimony. The lineage that bore the curse now becomes a monument to grace. The names that once trembled beneath judgment now shine beneath mercy. And for those who still feel bound by the sins of their fathers or the whispers of bloodlines soaked in sin, there is hope. For if Jesus can emerge from a line that includes prostitutes, adulterers, idolaters, and murderers, then he can redeem any line. No generational wound is too deep, no ancestral shadows too dark. The blood of Christ reaches backward as well as forward. His sacrifice echoes not only through eternity, but through memory. He does not merely silence shame, he turns it into song. This is why the genealogies matter. They are not dry lists, they are declarations. They say, God was never afraid of where you came from. He only ever cared about where you are going in him. The past is no longer a prison. It is a platform upon which the mercy of God is displayed for generations to come. The enemy may have sown the seed of rebellion, but God reaped a harvest of righteousness. And now, those who were once trapped in the cycle of inherited darkness can step into a new legacy, not by striving, but by believing. For in Christ, every curse becomes a testimony. Every wound becomes a window for glory. Every name, no matter how stained, can be inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life. The gospel is not the story of perfect people being preserved. It is the story of cursed people being redeemed. And that redemption runs deeper than blood. It rewrites what blood once carried. And for every shadow cast by Samael's legacy, there now stands a light brighter than the beginning. Jesus, the light of the world, the end of every curse, the beginning of every new creation. At the end of all things, when the scrolls of time are closed and the veil between seen and unseen is lifted forever, there will be no more hiding. The secrets buried in ages past, the whispered agreements of angels, the blood-soaked altars of defiance, the unrepentant lineages of rebellion will stand uncovered before the Ancient of Days. No more masks of religion, no more thrones built on lies, no more darkness dressed in light. The final separation will come, not merely of nations and kingdoms, but of seeds, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. What began in a garden with a whisper will end in a throne room with a roar. The book of Revelation opens a window into this closing act, where the dragon, the ancient serpent, the same spirit who moved through Samael's fall, rages against a woman clothed with the sun. She cries out in labor, bearing a child destined to rule the nations. The dragon seeks to devour, but is cast down. War erupts again in heaven, echoing the original revolt. Michael and his angels fight once more, not for Eden, but for eternity. And as the dragon is hurled to earth, his wrath intensifies, for he knows his time is short. This is not myth, it is memory foretold. The woman, the child, the dragon. All images, yes, but all realities. For behind every page of history is this cosmic tension, the lineage of light versus the legacy of darkness. Samael, though no longer visible, is present in this final conflict, not as a victor, but as a witness to his own unraveling. The curse he helped birth, the rebellion he modeled, the seductive union he pursued, all of it will face the fire of divine reckoning. And not only angels, but men. Every soul will be weighed. Bloodlines will not shield. Titles will not justify. Only the mark of the Lamb will matter. For those who are His, whose names are written in the book of life, the judgment will not be wrath, it will be vindication. They will stand not in their righteousness, but in His. They will be declared not cursed, but cleansed. And in that moment, the story will come full circle. The love that defiled, Samael's pursuit of Lilith, the desire that broke boundaries, the intimacy that birthed corruption, will be swallowed by a greater love, a holy love, a love that laid itself on a cross and rose in glory. The union that once mocked heaven will be eclipsed by a new union, Christ and His bride, the church purified by fire, clothed in white, radiant as the dawn. No longer will defiance sit on thrones. No longer will rebellion shape legacies. No longer will the curse whisper through bloodlines. It will be severed forever. The dragon will fall, the false prophet will burn, death and Hades will be cast into the lake of fire. And those who once feared the weight of inherited sin will sing the song of the Lamb, the song of those redeemed not only from deeds but from destinies rewritten by grace. This is the final separation, not just of light and darkness, but of identity. No one will stand in between. You are either of the Lamb or of the serpent. There is no middle bloodline. And for the redeemed, the past will no longer accuse. The story that began with forbidden desire, with angels gazing upon flesh and forsaking their place, will end with holy union. God dwelling with His people, not in a garden fenced by swords, but in a city lit by glory. There will be no more curse, no more tears, no more hiding. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and His servants will serve Him. They will see His face, His name will be on their foreheads, and night will be no more, for the light that conquers all shadows will reign forever. This is the end of Samael's legacy. This is the triumph of the Lamb. This is the promise for all who choose righteousness over rebellion, covenant over chaos, love that surrenders over love that seduces. And in that eternal day, the war will be over, not because peace was negotiated, but because holiness won forever.